Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. Now, do you consider yourself to be an empath or a highly sensitive person? And if so, do you struggle with emotional overwhelm because of how other people's feelings and emotions affect you? Or maybe because you are constantly triggered by things happening in the world around you? Well, in this teaching, we'll be looking at what's really going on here and the vital steps you can take to manage your emotions in a healthy way so you can reclaim your power as a beautiful, sensitive person. Okay, David. So an empath is defined as someone who has a very strong ability to feel and experience other people's emotions or mental states. And I know lots of people who believe they are empaths or highly sensitive people complain that they struggle with their emotions and they have constant red light emotions of sadness or anxiety because of the people around them experiencing their emotions, or because of world events affecting them. So my first question to you, David, is, are some people naturally empaths or highly sensitive people compared to others? Is this something that only affects certain people?
I think this is a good subject, Alex, because I think this can get very confused with empath and the word sensitivity, because I believe we're all sensitive people, and it's how we choose to define and use that sensitivity that's quite natural to every human being. So I think you've got to be careful of these definitions. A lot of my clients will say that they have to mirror somebody else's emotions, or they have to, if somebody else is feeling an emotion, they too have to feel it. And I think that's where it goes wrong, because it goes down to a basic Wu Wei teaching. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim. So that means that other people are the creator of their emotions. They also are not the victim of their emotions. And so therefore you cannot be the victim of other people's emotions.
But I would imagine, David, that a lot of people will say, if I see someone who's upset
Yes.
or angry, it's like I am so tuned into them, so tuned into their energy, their emotions, that it's like I'm absorbing. It's like I can't help myself. I just absorb their emotions.
Well, that's a choice that you're making, to connect to someone else's emotions and choose to absorb them. I would say use your sensitivity to try and understand why they are emotional. Wouldn't that be a far more helpful thing for you and for them, rather than matching or mirroring their emotions and repeating their emotions, which just puts you on the carousel and you both spiral off each other? Wouldn't it be better to use your great sensitivity to drop your shoulders, to take a breath, to come into your Wu Wei, to come into your balance, and then try and help them to find out why they are choosing to create that emotion?
So I guess, David, what you're suggesting there is almost putting in an extra step in the equation, because you're saying, of course, use your sensitivity, your emotional sensitivity to have an awareness, to have an appreciation of what someone else is experiencing. But that rather than then the next step being, I'm now going to experience exactly what that person's experiencing, you're saying, no, have an awareness, have an appreciation, use that fantastic skill you've got, but put in place some sort of, I don't know, a filtering system that stops this automatic default to you experiencing the emotions. Say, what can are you saying, what can I do with this understanding? What can I do with this fact that I've now tuned into this person? I understand what they're going through. I'm acutely aware of that they may be suffering. You're saying almost like engage your mind more rather than letting it automatically default to your emotions.
Well, to answer your question, I'm saying a couple of things. So mirroring somebody else's emotion who is emotionally upset is not going to help them, and it's not going to help you. So I would think, rather than basing your response to help them, if you're in a position to help or advise or counsel or put your arm around them or to guide them through, wouldn't that be better to do that from an intellectual, mature, calm, spiritual basis, rather than basing your response on your emotions? Because otherwise, all you're doing is they're responding to their emotions and then you're responding to your emotions. Where does the logic, where does the intellect, where does the spiritual interpretation of this situation comes into effect? I think the misunderstanding comes here with the word sensitivity, meaning that you are the victim of your emotions. And this is where I think it goes wrong. I think sensitivity means that you can act from your spiritual nature, that you can act appropriately, that you can listen to what someone else is saying, and you can try and help and guide them with your information, not go on this emotional dance where you're just spinning around each other, getting yourself more and more stressed or wound up. And that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help them. Certainly doesn't help you. And nothing gets resolved. So I think sensitivity relates to your spirituality. What is the best way that you can deal with it? What is the best way to guide this other beautiful human being through a difficult period that they're going through? I do not believe it can be the case to match their out of control emotions.
So you're saying absolutely have an awareness, tune into another person's emotions, be empathetic in that way. But that we also then have to, I like that word you use, interpret. Interpret what you have picked up, what you have sensed with your finely tuned senses, and then connect to your inner wisdom, your Shen, as you call it. And it's almost like you then plug in. So you've got the information from this person, their emotional state, their mental state. Now we want you to plug in and connect to your inner wisdom, your intuition, your Shen, and think, okay, so now how can I best manage myself and my emotions so I'm in a best possible position to help and support this other person, rather than you both kind of cascading down into a spiral of emotions and kind of bouncing each other's emotions off each other.
I think the thing is here, Alex, what is your fountainhead? What's your first domino? What's your foundation? Is your foundation emotions or is it spirituality? I want to offer you to be your Shen spirituality. Because if you base your life and how you interact with other people from your emotions, then you're just in the same spiral as they're being. And matching someone's emotions is not going to help them and not going to help you. I would prefer you to connect to your Shen, to your inner wisdom, and then you can try and help them to find out what is it that's creating their emotional state, and can you help? And this is where sensitivity is really important, because if you're sensitive, it means you can handle this situation with sensitivity. That's my interpretation of sensitivity. Not that you're so sensitive as you can't control your own emotions. It means that this fellow human being is in a difficult situation, maybe suffering a trauma, maybe misunderstanding something, maybe not to be able to interpret something. It's almost like I see it as like they're in a swimming pool drowning. Make sure you can swim before you dive in, else you'll both drown. So it's about connecting to your truth, your integrity, your honesty, and then you can use your sensitivity in the most positive way, because now you can learn to navigate your way through their emotions and try and reach to what is the life lesson, the problem, the issue that they are facing, that they're having difficulty with in that moment.
And you know, David, what I like about this approach that you're suggesting is that a lot of the teachings around empaths and highly sensitive people are, there's a big problem, and the way you solve the problem is to protect your energy, to stop other people kind of like vampiring your energy off you, because you're like almost like an emotional sponge where energy can be taken from you and negative energy can be given to you. I mean, I'm kind of exaggerating, but you get the idea. Whereas what you're suggesting is like, we're not saying shield yourself off. We're not saying close yourself off. We're not saying emotionally withdraw from certain people in order to protect yourself. What we're saying is be sensitive, be tuned into other people, be acutely aware of the energy balance in a room or the energy balance within other people. That's a wonderful skill. But use that in an interpretive way. Use that in a way that you're still rooted and grounded to your inner wisdom, your inner truth, your Shen, and that no matter, I guess, what's going on with people around you or in the world around you, that you have that rootedness, that connectedness, which means you're not going to be blown around by other people's emotions or other people's mental states.
Well, this is so important, Alex, because a lot of my clients see their sensitivity and offer me their sensitivity as somehow as a weakness. They'll call themselves, I'm highly sensitive or ultra sensitive. And I see sensitivity not as a weakness, but actually as your greatest strength. It means you can deal in the most challenging, traumatic, difficult situations, the most difficult people, the hardest bosses, your friends being unreasonable. You can deal with that with sensitivity. If you think about the word, using your senses, knowing appropriately what is the right thing to do, when it's time to let go, when it's time to walk away, when it's time to confront an issue and not confrontational. And that's the big difference here. When you use your sensitivity as something of a superpower, we often talk about what are your superpowers. And you wouldn't be listening to this if you hadn't got an issue with sensitivity. You are a sensitive person. And so why don't you use that sensitivity in the correct way, that you can listen to people, you can cut through the emotions that they're transmitting and try and get to what really is the issue, that they need some help or guidance or some wisdom or some understanding or a different perception, or even just somebody listening to them. You know, that's sometimes one of the greatest helps you can do with somebody that's going through a difficult time, is just to be able to sit there and be sympathetic, listen. You don't have to evoke your emotions to match their emotions, because that's not going to help them. Because normally they're looking for some kind of an anchor or a rock, somebody to be calm, to be stable. When they're fighting all their emotions, they don't want somebody else jumping in and fighting with them. They want somebody there, much calmer, much more centered, much more in their Wu Wei.
And so, David, I'm wondering why, because everything we've talked about kind of makes logical sense. But I would think that a lot of people listening to this teaching will say, yeah, but there's a part of me that kind of spirals into this emotional jet stream of the other person. Is that got something to do with our inner child, do you think?
It definitely would be inner child work, because as I've said, with the majority of my clients who listen to our videos and book a session and we work through, they'll say something like, Alex, I intellectually, maturely understand that I create my emotions, but, and that 3-letter word is so powerful, but, and that means they don't really accept it. And the part of the mind that I would label the inner child, and we've done numerous videos on what I'm calling the inner child, that part of your mind does not believe that they create their emotions. They believe emotions are an external attack on them. Have you ever watched those old films where they all fire the arrows and a shower of arrows come to them? That's how they see emotions. They see it as something that's coming in at them. And so what they're doing is trying to protect themselves. They have this idea, and if you've ever said this to yourself, I want emotional protection or safety, then they have a misunderstanding. They believe that they have to protect themselves from other people's emotions. They don't understand the basic Wu Wei teaching is that you are the creator of your emotions. Every emotion that you experience, you have created it. And so what they're trying to do is to control or manipulate other people so their emotions don't affect them and they're not in control of their own emotions.
And in the case of the inner child, in the empath, it would be that the inner child believes that it has no control, no filter system, no moderation whatsoever, no filtering role, no moderation role whatsoever when someone else is experiencing, say, challenging or painful emotions. It's like their emotions are now attacking me.
Exactly.
And that's a kind of what you're saying is that's a kind of inner child viewpoint.
Yes, definitely the inner child viewpoint. And then the inner child will say something like, I'm overwhelmed. So if you ever use that word, but how can you be overwhelmed by someone else's emotions? They don't set up a wave and wave over you. You're allowing that by the way you perceive it. So again, this is a typical inner child statement. I'm being overwhelmed. I'm overcome. This is too much for me. And then you'll go to one of the three lies. I can't cope. I can't cope with this. It's all too much for me. And then they'll roll out a statement. It's because I'm too sensitive.
Yeah.
It's because I'm hypersensitive. It's because, and what they're actually saying is, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. I want to live a life where everything is how I want it to be. The problem is you don't live in that reality.
So do you think in that regard, David, that actually we can acknowledge and not deny, and we should celebrate that we are beautiful, sensitive people, but sometimes if we allow ourselves to label ourselves as an empath or a highly sensitive person, if we're not careful, the story we attach to those labels can create more problems for us.
Exactly. So it's the definition of what you mean by an empath, or I think that's a very dangerous word, so I would watch that word. Or being sensitive, I think is a good word, that it means you can sensitively deal with any issue. But it's to sit down quietly in what I would call a meditation of focus and say, what do I mean when I use the word sensitivity? What do I mean when I label myself as a sensitive person or a highly sensitive person or very sensitive? What does that actually mean? And I think if you did that little exercise on the back of this video, and for those of you who like journaling, this is a really nice little journal entry to write down and just write it down. So if you say to yourself, I am very sensitive, then just write down, what is my definition? Don't look in the dictionary. Just what's my definition of what does that mean? And I think you've got to be very careful because you'll be skirting along the lines of, I am the victim.
Yes.
That's what you've got to be careful of. Because remember, I say it on every video because it's so vitally important. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim. And so if anything in your definition of what sensitivity means is you being the victim, then you need to really study, is that what sensitivity really means? So that might be something you could write in under this video, or if you're a member of our community, perhaps write down, what is your definition? Again, don't look at the dictionary. Don't read anybody else's. What's your definition of being sensitive? I think it's your superpower. I think it means that you can address people, situation, events, any stimuli from a very sensitive, caring, but based in your truth, honesty, and integrity that I would call your Shen spiritual nature.
And you used quite a strong word there, David. You said the label empath can be a dangerous
Yes.
label. Is that because, generally speaking, more often than not, when we think of an empath, it's about this lack of control, lack of agency, lack of self-responsibility, in that we are just, as you say, use the word victim, we become a victim to other people's emotions. And actually, that's not the truth of the matter, because the truth of the matter is we don't have to be a victim if we interpret the emotions rather than free falling with them.
Exactly. I'm just getting that from when I work with my clients, and they will kind of use that word, and they'll use that word for exactly the reasons that you say. They will kind of hold up their hands and say, I can't do anything about it. If somebody walks into the room and they're angry, then I become angry, sad, upset, anxious, fearful, scared. And you see, immediately when you get onto that belief system, you now are not in control of your life. You are being pulled along by emotions. And what you're saying, they're not even your emotions. They're other people's emotions. So you're really in a tailspin now. You're going round and around and kind of looking constantly outside of you like somebody on high alert to live your life in what way? To live your life reactively. And all our videos are about you living your life proactively, you being in control, you basing it on what you believe to be your truth in integrity. And that's why that word empathic and empath is something you've got to be very clear about. And again, that might be something, again, write down your definition. What do you mean by it? Because you use a very important word when you said story. And that definition of being highly sensitive becomes your story, becomes who you are, and then becomes your identity. So just check it out and make sure, again, I say it on every video, what do you believe? Why do you believe it?
Yeah.
That's the key. And again, the little test and the Wu Wei Wisdom, would you say that to your physical child? Would you say to your physical child, well, you're very sensitive, so you're not in control of your emotions.
Yeah.
Your emotions
And you have to
depend,
protect
and you
yourself.
have to protect yourself, and your emotions depend on other people. And if they're upset, then you can't help being upset. This is not very kind of building that child on good foundations of spirituality. That's building your child on foundations of emotions.
And I guess, if we continue this idea of what you would teach your child, this Wu Wei Wisdom approach is still about being sensitive to
Being
other
more
people,
sensitive,
being
absolutely.
very sensitive,
Yes.
being compassionate, still being
Absolutely,
supportive, but
absolutely.
not closing yourself off, not withdrawing yourself, not trying to protect yourself, not free falling with the emotions, putting in place this kind of middle ground where you interpret the emotions, tune into them, interpret them, connect within to your intuition, your inner wisdom, your guidance, say, okay, so what should I do here for myself, and what can I do here for this other person? But in a way that you're not emotionally free falling.
And I think that's very important, because that's what several clients have said to me. Well, if I look at this approach, doesn't it mean I'm going to be harsh and nasty and uncaring? And I think it's the opposite.
Yeah.
I think it allows you to be very sensitive, very connected, looking at what that person or that situation requires and being able to deliver what they require. I think that's more sensitive and more compassionate and more authentic, and displays your true spirituality, rather than you say jumping off the cliff with a person and spinning round to both in an emotion like turmoil that doesn't help them and certainly doesn't help you. So I want you to connect back to who you really are, and connect back to your wisdom, to your inner knowing, and use your sensitivity appropriately, truthfully, spiritually.
And would this also apply to us being highly sensitive to events happening around us. So what it could be global situations or situations within our own kind of family or neighborhood. The same principles apply, that we should be sensitive to what's happening, but that we shouldn't free fall and let our emotions overtake us, because that disempowers us.
Well, I think you're right, because we're living in such horrific times where we see every day on our televisions, on the newspapers, horrific stories. But being drawn into that is not going to help the story. It's not going to help you. So it's about you understanding and taking accountability. What is the best way that you can sensitively address that situation? And what is the best way that you can help? And looking at that, rather than letting your emotions pull you under the water and take you down, because that's not going to help anybody. And that might be something simple like lending a hand at a charity, or giving some charity, or sending a letter, or changing your responses to situations. That could be something as global as global warming, or looking after your refuge, and being responsible and being sensitive to your impact, because you can make a difference. And use your sensitivity in a proactive, real way that affects you and your family and those around you, and live to what you believe to be true.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Well, we've done lots more teachings on these topics. We have a whole playlist for the highly sensitive person where we discuss all your beautiful qualities and how you can best manage them. So I will put a link to that playlist in the show notes, as well as other teachings on how to manage your emotions, how to stop being triggered, and lots of related teachings on this subject. If you have enjoyed this, please do let us know, and maybe share it with someone else who you think may also benefit. David works every week with clients all over the world by Zoom video call on issues just like this. And if you are interested in learning more about David's one-to-one sessions, I will put a link below in the show notes as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.